For those of you joining us at home, thank you so much for doing so. I'm Regina Malveaux, Executive Director of the Washington State Women's Commission, and I am so excited and grateful to have the opportunity for the Women's Commission to host retired Seattle Chief of Police Carmen Best, who's written this extraordinary book which talks a lot about the barriers in her career, her important ideas around law enforcement and racial reconciliation, and I'm just really grateful that you accepted our invitation to come have this conversation, so thank you.
Thank you.
And Michelle Merriweather, I have the great privilege of working closely with. She is my chair at the Washington State Women's Commission and also the president and CEO of the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, which does extraordinary work. They just did an incredible fundraiser yesterday, which was so inspiring. And so the fact that you are here helping us host this on the heels of that recognize that I know how significant that is, so thank you very much. And just to every one of you who decided to join us tonight, thank you, thank you, thank you. I know many of us are no longer accustomed to going out and being in groups of people, and this is one of my first, and I just could not have asked for a more incredible group of people to spend the evening with. I have been told that because we all did show our proof of vaccination or negative COVID test as we entered, that it is okay to remove your mask if you'd like. You certainly are not required to, but you're welcome to. So with that, I will turn the microphone over, and I'm very much looking forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Me too.
Good evening. I'm so excited for this. I am so excited for this. How you doing, Chief?
I'm doing good. How are you, Michelle?
I'm wonderful now, especially.
Yeah.
You know, you are a dear friend, so this conversation will feel a little different for me anyway, because, you know, I've known you for a little while and had the privilege to call you my friend and sister, but whenever I interview someone, I like to just check in to see how you're feeling today and how you are joining us today.
Well, I'm feeling good now that I'm here. I feel great about it, and I couldn't think of a better place to be right now. This place is beautiful. The Wow Museum is absolutely, if you haven't been here, you need to come see it. It's fantastic. I want to thank Hiawatha, you know, for having us here, and Veronica, and in the room are just, it's just beautiful, all these wonderful, beautiful, successful women and a guy that are here tonight. I'm just honored beyond measure at all of you, and very thankful to be here. So I'm in a good spot. I'm in a very good spot, Michelle.
Good. And we are in the Black Love Gallery, and on the wall it says, "What does Black love mean to you?" So I think that that's going to be my first question, just because of where we are and the awe of this space. I'm going to ask that question just before we start on the book and all of the things of your life. I want to ask that.
Well, there's so much of my life in the book, you know, and so when you ask a question like Black love, I think of my mother, like most people would, and just that boundless love, you know, that goes forever, and the love of a mother and a parent that reaches back through our ancestors, really, and that strong, deep love that keeps us going, that abides within us, that we receive it and we give it, and this room is certainly a representation of that.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. So now I want to ask about the beginning, right? In your book, you talk about how people doubted your ability all through the academy, and I'm just wondering how where you got your confidence from through your journey to get where you are with all the doubt and other, you know, naysayers around you.
Yeah, well, there's definitely an element of resilience in there for sure, because I absolutely believe in resiliency. We all have to be able to bounce back. And I think in there, I can't paraphrase exactly, but pretty much I talk about the fact that it's not that you're going to not have disappointments and times when you are down, when it just doesn't work out your way. We all have experienced that. I think everyone in this room, and certainly the folks out there who are watching this on live streaming. But it's how you react when you take a hit, when you fall, when things don't work out the way you want them. That's when you really have to, when your character matters, and you can lean on your resiliency and others to help lift you up. Those moments that it just doesn't work your way. Yeah. And so I think that's an incredibly important piece. So there were times, and I specifically pointed out times in the book where there were challenges, and some of them I met well, and some of them not so well. And that's just life. I think we all have those stories. But I really feel like it's the way you come back from that that really builds you and helps you grow and learn and walk through that next door, whatever it is, with the level of confidence.
Care to share a brief story with us of that journey?
A brief story. Well, yeah, hopefully you've all bought the book and read the book.
I have mine for you to sign, by the way.
Yeah, there's so many things in there, and there were so many lessons that I wanted to talk about. And we all have those experiences, but there were certain lessons I really wanted to share and key themes. And I think standing up for yourself, right in the beginning, I talk about that. And these are all true stories, just life stories that I thought were important to share. But one from when I was in high school. And I wish Vonda was here, but she's a local attorney. She probably hates that I put her name in the book, but I told her ahead of time. And we were all going to a party. I talk about us all being in the car going to a party. Vonda and myself, African-American women, Tracy, the girl with us, a white girl. And we're going to the party in her car, and we're following some guys out there, and they stop, and they pull, and Tracy gets out, and they end up talking to her. And they really didn't want, her to bring Vonda and I to the party because they didn't want any black people at the party. And I talk about this very specifically because I remember my first reaction was, okay, well, let's go home. They don't want us there. I don't want to be there. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't have any problems. We'll just go home. And their reaction, both Tracy and Vonda, was, oh, we're not going home. We are definitely going to that party. We're going. We're making a stay. And I was like, oh, okay. But, I thought about that later because we went to the party, had a good time, for the most part, came back home. But it was a lesson for me, even though, I was in my teens, about, standing up for yourself and standing up for who you are, being comfortable in your skin when you kind of might feel uncomfortable for a reason. Like, I know some people there probably didn't want to see me there. But it was important to walk through that and to work through that. And I was so glad for that lesson at a young age because there have been other times in the room, particularly in policing, where I'm kind of a unicorn, where I've been the only one in the room. I know we have at least 2 female cops in here right now, but often it's you, right? Yeah. And you'll have those experiences. And you need to be very comfortable with who you are and in your skin at that time.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about that journey of being not only a woman in policing, but a black woman in policing, and then elevating to leadership where, you're certainly in the minority as a black individual, but again, as a woman. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, well, I talk a lot about, I think we need more women, so I'll say that right away. I think we need more women in policing because we don't have as many as we should. We have, I think, we're hovering around 14% nationally. So I'd love to see more women because I think we bring that nurturing, those nurturing characteristics to the profession, and we need that. I know there's a lot of folks there's a lot of controversy around policing and all of that, but honestly, my personal opinion is that we do need to have an element of society that helps us keep the rules. But we wanted people to do it with fairness and with justice. And so much of, and I know we have some judges in here today too, so much they will tell you of what we deal with in the field are people at their worst moments, whether they're the victim of something, whether they've committed a crime of some way, but it's not their best moment. And we need to be able to have compassion and empathy no matter who it is we're dealing with, And I think that women bring a special element of that to the profession. So I'd love to see, more women in the profession. But your question was about my own journey about being a woman, and a lot of that is, that sisterhood, but also a lot of men too. I talk a lot about having mentors and sponsors and allies, people who will take you under their wing and help you out. I've had a lot of people who've done that, many women, many black women, but also many men and other people who, in other professions, who made it a point to help me, right? And to, none of us is successful on our own. Nobody. So if somebody says it, I did it myself, it's just not true. You didn't. Everyone relies on other people at some point to help you, to lift you up. And the good part of that is that that gives you the opportunity to help others and lift them up. So I think a lot of the journey was having great mentors. So I talk in the book specifically about Sergeant Pat Hayes, and tightening me up from when I was a young rookie officer. And now she's one of my friends, but boy, she don't let that smile fool you. Yeah, okay, that is definitely an iron fist and a velvet glove. But she really helped me out. I talk about Chief Kurlikowski, who went on to be the drug czar, and then the head of Customs and Border Patrol, and then Chief Kathleen O'Toole, who helped me as well. She made me the deputy chief, and I wasn't even expecting, I was like glad to just be, in the ranks, right? And then she really, elevated me and really taught me a lot along the way. And so many other people who supported me. So I think that part of the journey when you have those challenges is recognizing who your supporters are and relying on them to help you out when you need it.
Definitely, definitely. And I'm going to open the floor for questions in a little bit because I want this to be conversational and not just me grilling you with questions, although I can do that. But it's less fun that way for you maybe, but it'll be fun for me. I have so many questions here. I think I enjoy hearing about the life lessons. So I want to talk about your journey as through Chief, and of course your retirement. So I want to start with the how you became chief. Do you feel like talking about that?
I'll talk about
Okay.
it. You know me, I'll talk about it.
I'm like, which questions shall I ask? I want to talk about that moment because we all know here in Seattle, of course, that was a moment of controversy.
Sure.
And of course, you have some folks that certainly supported your journey here. I want to hear about it through your lens and your eyes.
It's funny because the prologue starts with when I found out I wasn't in the top 3 for chief, and I was I thought it was outrageous too. I was so, just deeply disappointed. Yeah. And I talk about the tears stinging my eyes. All of that is real. I mean, I just felt the tears sting my eyes, but didn't want to cry, and just had to sort of absorb everything. And then, I write about this, and so I realized, okay, I'm not in the top 3, and I'm pretty surprised by it, and felt like it was unfair. You have those moments like, this just isn't fair. Something isn't right here. But even with that, you have to accept, the cards you've been dealt, so to speak. So I walk back across the street, cross in, go into the public safety building, hit the elevator, go up to the 8th floor, walk in, just try to, process everything. And there's all my staff standing there, like 15 people. And many of them are super upset because we work so closely. And then I gotta go, I gotta pull it together. Right? I can't, have my moment be that moment. So I just talked to them all and told them, hey, everybody get back to work. This is fine. We always knew this could happen. We have work to do. Let's not let this, set us back. We still have stuff to carry on. But on the inside, I was crushed. And then I had to go back in because the officers of the department really didn't know many yet, so I had to write up a statement. I show that in the book. I wrote up a statement, proofread it, had a couple people look at it, and sent that out. And then, I talked to a few folks and then was able to close the door and sort of process, like, geez, I spent, my almost half my life here, and I worked really hard, and I thought I'd have a shot at it, and it's not going to happen. Yeah. And I just had to accept it's not going to happen. It was hard, though, and then I just had to talk myself into, okay, well, we got to go with the next step, whatever that is. So, a few days later, I was actually going to a conference, which I was glad to get out of town, because it's one thing not to get the job, but to have it on the front page of the paper every other day, it's like reminding you that you didn't get the job was kind of tough. So that was nice to sort of get away. And so I went away to a conference. Of course, everybody there was still talking, a bunch of police folks, and they were all like, "Oh, we're so sorry you didn't get the job." I go, "Well, let's not make this a wake. It'll be okay." And then I got back, and I was hearing about just sort of inkling that people were coming together and sort of, making a stir, if you will, about, me being put back in the running. And I really didn't know much about it. I wasn't that aware of what was happening. And I got a text actually from a former chief, and he was saying, "Well, what are you going to do if it ends up that you're back in?" I go, "What are you talking about? What's happening?" But there were some folks, people here today, Corinda Harris and Vivian Phillips, and I know a whole host of other people. So I'm sorry if I don't name you all, who are behind the scenes, saying we're just going to make this right. And we want, and Lisa Dugard was one of the folks as well. I remember working on this, a whole host of people. So if I don't name you, don't be offended. It's just there was a lot of folks working on it, unbeknownst to me, to really make their concern known. And ultimately, somebody dropped out, and I was able to, get back in the running. And my pride made me want to say, when I was asked, "Well, do you want to, go back?" My pride made me want to say, "No, I don't want to go back." But sometimes you have to swallow your pride and do what the right thing is to do. And I really wanted it, so why would I be, have that false bravado? So I just said, "Yeah, I would love to have the opportunity to serve in this capacity." And the rest is history, so to speak, because I was able to, through after a whole host of interviews and other things, able to become the
And
chief.
look at you now.
Yeah. And
Look
it was
at
so
you
proud,
now.
so proud.
Look at you now. It sounds like you've had a lot of women in the background looking out for you from high school to then to now. Yeah. So that's awesome. I love it. And so in your journey, you've certainly worked for a few administrations, a few mayors. What are the things that most surprised you from administration to administration along your journey?
Yeah, well, I'll say this. I mean, everything evolves and change, and every administration, no matter who it is going to have its challenges.
Yeah.
And I've had the fortune in my career to work about half of my career, in the chief's office in some capacity, whether PIO or supervisor or, in some way or form, And so I've seen a lot of different chiefs and a lot of different administrations go through. And they all have their challenges, and they all are trying to deal with public safety and other issues. I think it's been the most challenging the last couple of years, the last 3 years, more so than I've seen even in the history. And I was here during WTO, and that was really hard. Right, Miss Vivian?
I've heard.
It was really hard.
I've heard stories.
But this last few years has been, it's been a time of reckoning and change. We shouldn't reject that. Change is often very good, but that you get bumps and bruises along the way sometimes, and that's been very difficult. Every year, except for the last couple years, Harvard has what they call this Harvard Public Safety Summit, and they invite chiefs from all over the country to go to this summit, and they talk about problems. They put you're in the basement of this building at Harvard, and they have a big screen up there, and they're really discussing, what we're trying to do, where we're going, how to make things better, what's our role here, very deep discussions that you can have amongst your peers. Yeah. And before you go, they have you fill out this survey, to talk about all the issues that you're facing and what's the most difficult, what's most pressing. So every chief fills that out, and then you get there, and all the Harvard professor folks, they collate all the answers, and they put it on a big screen, and they put it, I call it an idea bubble, but basically they put it out there, and you can see all the things that come up, and the darker it is and the bigger it is, the more often that it came up. And so all the normal stuff that you would think, budget, domestic violence, gangs, burglaries, all the things that you would think that chiefs would be concerned about was on this bubble. It's kind of shaped like a football. But the biggest thing, the darkest thing right in the middle, politics. Out of everything that all these chiefs, large and small agencies, are dealing with, the toughest thing for everybody was working through the politics. Because even though you have your standards, your thoughts, your ideas, your groups, your stakeholders, your businesses, your all of that coming forward, the politics will often shape what you're doing more so, or can shape what you're doing more so than, just the basics of doing the right, wrong, and the good of the job. And so, and you have to be so grounded to not let the politics overwhelm you or take more of a role than it should in doing what's just and fair. And so I think that that's the biggest challenge, of all.
I wish I had the answer to that one. That's I
Yeah.
think the politics comes in so many jobs now, but certainly in policing. So you handled it with tremendous grace. I will say that. Does Before I ask my next question, I wanted to check with our audience in here to see if you all have any questions.
I just wanted to say that as a stakeholder, so although I'm currently with the Women's
Can
Commission,
they hear her out there? Okay.
I previously ran two large domestic violence service organizations, and we have very close partnership with law enforcement, right?
Yes.
We in fact founded something called the Family Justice Center. The Family Justice Center model, as you know, comes out of San Diego, and we founded one in the community that I was working in. And our mission, stated mission, to keep victims safe and hold perpetrators accountable. And in that regard, we have a very close working relationship with law enforcement. We were also a social justice organization.
Sure.
And over time, the more intense challenges became relative to police brutality and, quite frankly, murders. As the mother of a young black man and a grandmother to two babies who were going to be black men, it became increasingly difficult for me when I would see these law enforcement leaders who I had great respect for in most regards and had good relationship with, when I would see them catering to the wrong element of politics in the media. And at some point I realized I don't think I can continue to do my job well because I'm not convinced I can continue to have an appropriate relationship with a particular law enforcement leader. So how did, and I know that folks did not have that issue with you because of the kind of leader that you are, but for folks from community who maybe are challenged about their relationships with law enforcement. So I'd like to think I have a pretty strong street credibility card, which was kind of tugged on more than one occasion
Right.
after I had social media photos posted with law enforcement.
Yeah.
And so what would you say to folks who are activists in communities of color, particularly where there have been murders and horrific incidents? What would you say? How do we go about trying to continue to be in relationship with law enforcement leadership if in those particular communities there that leadership is not as open to change?
Yeah. Well, I don't see how any police leadership is gonna advance if they're not open to hearing. One of the things I say all the time is you have to acknowledge the history way back and the history last week, right? We have to acknowledge the history of things that have happened,
Yeah.
particularly in communities of color. I mean, particularly with black males in the community. I mean, the data is there. It's not me sitting here making it up or anybody. The data is there. We all know what the data shows. So there is disparity. So we have to acknowledge the disparity, but at the same time, while we acknowledge the disparity, have the conversations about peeling back the layers about what we're going to do to turn it around. And I say this often because I have that same conflict. I mean, I wore a uniform. I don't even wear a uniform now. I wore a uniform, but I didn't change the person who I was, my history, my family, my relatives, And so I recognize all those struggles, but I also recognize the importance that the profession can have if it's done correctly. And so I think you have to acknowledge where there's transgressions and hold people accountable. You said the word accountability. People have to be held accountable when things don't go well. And that's why there's all this discussion about qualified immunity and other issues, because people want to make sure that if something doesn't go well, because it's not if but when, because there's
Yeah.
80,000 law enforcement officials in this country, But when it goes awry, for whatever reason, there's accountability in the system, right? And every time we have one of these high-profile cases, I find that all of us are holding our breath to see what the outcome is going to be. So that lets you know that we're not quite where we need to be, right? So we still need to, work on our systems, to make sure that they have more fairness. Because if we felt more confident in the system, we wouldn't have that tight feeling like what's going to happen here, when sometimes it's pretty darn obvious what the outcome should be. So, but I reconcile myself with that. I know there'll be good days and bad days. There'll be things that make me really proud, and there'll be things that I'm like, we got to do something about this, right? That doesn't mean that the whole thing is broken. It just means there are pieces that need to be fixed.
Yeah.
That's really how I see it.
What do you want to see fixed in policing nationally? What do you see? What do you hope to see?
Well, a couple of things I would say. So just on a really practical level, I think many of the things that were suggested in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, a lot of that's very reasonable accountability, no-knock warrants. In Seattle, they haven't done a no-knock warrant in at least 20 years that I know of. And, so we don't have that consistency across every organization.
Right.
So we should have some consistent ground rules that everybody works by these rules. So no matter where you are, your geography doesn't determine the level of service you get. And that's the Breonna Taylor situation. People kicking in the door, no-knock warrants, dressed in plain clothes. I personally would never go in plain clothes and kicking in the door because, it's kind of dangerous for us too, right?
Yeah.
So there are some rules and regulations and policies and practices that I think should be just unilateral across the board, and that would be very helpful. But also, the truth of the matter is, police, they recruit from the human race. So if you think, I say this all the time, if you think you can have this pristine, non-racial department, non-racialized, that would be great, but you still got to deal with all the other elements, because those folks are still out there in other areas as well. So all the isms that we're dealing with, they're not unique to a profession. We have a doctor in the room. I'm sure she can tell you there's other people in the healthcare profession that have problems about race. There are people who are artists who have problems about race. There are people who are your bus driver, your mailman, your grocery clerk. So we need to dig deep, as a society, as a country, to figure out how we're going to change the narrative around race and racial disparity and racism. Because you can't eliminate it from one slice. It's got to be a unilateral thing all across the board.
Absolutely, you're right. Hello. Oh, he's going to bring you a
Good.
microphone.
We have a microphone.
So
That's great.
our viewing audience can.
Yeah. I'm a
really
little,
for
I'm a
the
little worried that
audience
she has
on
a
the-
microphone.
So Carmen, in talking about this, I think that we all recognize that systems individually and systemically, obviously, need to address issues of reconciliation, particularly within Black communities, Native American communities, communities of color. What does reconciliation from the police perspective look like for those communities?
Well, a lot of that's going to be, I like to use the data, I know it sounds very academic, but data-driven approach. It's like when these numbers when there's not a spike or a difference and everything looks unilateral, I think we can reconcile ourselves if we reach where we're supposed to be. And we haven't made it there yet. You know that. So that to me was going to be the true reconciliation. When you being you, the unilateral you, the big us, when we know that, hey, this person coming to my door, I don't have to worry that if my child is in crisis and I have to call the police, I'm not worried that my child's going to be the one that's going to end up hurt. And so that's when you can feel like you have the true reconciliation, when those things occur.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Question?
No one?
No one? All right. Gina, who's going to bring you the microphone? The microphone is for our friends watching from home.
Yes.
Gina is my wonderful board chair, point of privilege.
Yes, she's great.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, Chief, for your service.
Thank you.
So I guess I have two questions. My first is, you think about your entire career in law enforcement, and I'm sure you have many moments that probably stick in your mind.
Sure.
What is one that really resonates for you that you are either most proud of or just really sticks out, and that you that you just kind of, when you think about it, it's a really proud moment for you?
Well, I'm going to be honest. Many of you were here for my proudest moment, and that was when I got sworn in by Judge Anita in the African American Museum, and it was awesome. I don't think anything's going to top that. We had Miss Melba and the tap dancers, and they sang the Black National Anthem, and the clergy was there, my family was there, so many community members in a place of history and African American history. It was just one of those moments that I'll never forget. I was never more proud and more humbled and more honored than that moment. It was absolutely fantastic. So that was a great moment.
It was a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
Thank you for remembering, Regina.
Now there's more.
So while you were serving as chief, me, along with I'm sure many others, were very proud to see you there.
Thank you.
For our young women, I have a daughter. I have 5 African American males. So to see you there was, every time I saw you, it was a proud moment for me. I'm just going to say that. And so now you're not there. I see you here, and I'm still proud of you, but I miss you in that role. So would you ever consider some form or a role in law enforcement in the future?
It's funny you would ask that. Well, yes, I would consider it if the right thing came along. But I would say, in Seattle, I love Seattle. And that was like the most challenging time for me in many ways. Also the most rewarding time in a lot of ways. But the chief they have in there now, the interim chief, Chief Diaz, I think he's great. Yeah. I've worked with him side by side for over a decade, and he's the real deal. He's not in it for the glory or anything like that, but just to do right, by the community and by the officers both. So I think I had my time. It's his time. I would love to see him continue on in that capacity. But, I'm still engaged in a lot of things, the International Association for Chiefs of Police and other speaking things that I've been associated with. And there may be a position or two out there that I would throw my hat in the ring. Probably they've been written about, but I'm not going to talk about them at this moment. So, I mean, because, you can't it's hard to spend half of your life in a profession and then just, and then walk away. So I'll always have some level of engagement. But, where that takes me for sure, I don't know yet, right? So I'm still growing and waiting.
So there's going to be
see.
a part 2 of this book.
A part 2 of this book. That's
there's
right.
There's a part 2.
Yeah,
The end has not been written yet.
Yeah, that's right.
This is just
an ongoing story.
Exactly,
folks.
exactly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gina.
Well, look, I know we have viewing audience and folks at home and champagne to drink here.
Yeah.
So I don't want to keep us too long, but I want to ask you. If you have any parting words of wisdom to share, particularly to young women of color who are curious about what's next for their life and what their journey will bring. Talk to your granddaughter right now.
That's so funny because my daughter actually had me do that. She gets out the recorder, sits me down with the grandbaby, and wants me to hear, what lessons I would want to impart on her. And of course, there's just so many things I would love to say to people, but I won't belabor it too much. One I would say is believe in yourself. Honestly, if you don't believe in yourself and believe you can do it, it doesn't matter what other people believe. It's not going to happen unless you believe in yourself. And you have to know that you can do anything. And then the other thing is, preparation in a real practical sense. It's one thing to fantasize about a job or a position or a career or a life choice. It's another thing to do the work to get there. So, and like so many of you in this room have done, doctors, attorneys, lawyers, nonprofit chairs, artists, everybody here has put in the work to be successful where they are. And so I would tell people, put in the work. Get your education, learn the skill or the craft that you're interested in, follow your dreams, do the work to get there. And then, should you be so lucky the opportunity crosses your way, you can reach out and grab it and you're ready, right? You know, you can't say, I wish I would have been ready. You'll be ready, and you can do it.
If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. Is that?
Yeah.
Is that the?
Yeah, to quote Russell Wilson,
Yeah,
preparation is separation.
There we go. There we go. There we go. And before we end, I would be remiss if I did not ask my sister Veronica to come up and
Yes.
share your story of how you brought this beautiful space. Do you mind?
And it is
Do you mind?
fabulous. Yes.
We need, this is beautiful, this is historic, and just very special, and I would love for you to share.
Oh, that's very kind. No applause necessary. Let's start there. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. I am just thrilled. Thank you so much, Miss Regina, and Carlos, for your kind and powerful recommendation to thank you for seeing us, right? There is, dear sister, I see you. And there is, dear sister, I see you. And there is, I see you. And there is, with the eyebrow up, way south or way north, I see you. And I want to say to my sister, I see you. And I've seen you, and I've watched you, and I have actually labored with you, whether you have realized that or not. While Gallery is a public expression of sacred space that, you know, provides essentially for us a powerful space and place for us to protest differently, okay? There are all kinds of protests that are important and necessary, and I walk through those protests with you in my own way from my living room and my Twitter account. But for us, this is our form of a protest. What does that mean? That means that we are beginning with us. That means that we are centering Black women, Black love, and the Black community in the framework and context of love, light, liberation, and legacy. Love because you gotta love yourself before you love anybody else, and light because when the light comes on, you get a chance to see some stuff that you know you need to see in order to tell the truth so you can be liberated and lean into, you know, your purpose and your destiny. And what's it all for if you don't leave a legacy? And so I'm grateful to see all of you who are in the work, right? And that you are in this space. 8 galleries that basically I gave birth to on the corner of 6th and Olive, the same place to which the community was in direct conflict, right? With tear gas and all sorts of other things, right? That I said, we will not act like that didn't just happen. We will create a space and place for all of us to come together and for us to create space for healing, education, and inspiration through stories and art. It always works that way, right? It always seems to, you know, bring us back to that point where, you know, what can we create? How can we create a different community, a different life, a different experience, not just for present generations, but for future generations? So that's what Wild Gallery is about. And I hope very much that you have enjoyed the experience of over 225 years of Black history, making ancestors, elders, and queens painted by my husband, Hiawatha D. Give him a hand. And Hiawatha and myself are born and raised here in Seattle. You know, we've only been together for the past 6 years, but in this 6 years, we've experienced a lifetime. And we know that we are here on purpose, and this is our calling. And we do not apologize for it, and we don't wait or ask for permission to create sacred space for Black art, a proliferation of Black art stories and healing pathways that take us to new heights that will go beyond the tear gas and other stuff that we've experienced. So I want to thank you, my sister, and I want to thank you, my sister, and say, dear sister, I see you. Dear sister, I see you. And dear sister, Miss Regina, I see you. Thank you.
Well said. Beautiful, beautiful words.
You may say that you and Hiawatha have only been together for 6 years, but your souls have been together long before that. I will promise you that. What you guys have created in such a short time lets us know that y'all have been together long before that and will long after this. So thank you. And it's possible for the rest of us. Amen. Amen.
By the book.
Well, yes. So we will close with the book is out and available. And where can we find it?
Well, if you go to www.blackinbluebook.com, it'll list all the places where it can be found. But it is on Amazon.com, at Barnes & Noble, at the University Bookstore, and a whole host of other independent booksellers as well. So go to www.blackinbluebook.com.
And I'm sure we'll see you on MSNBC and other places. And we appreciate you and love you. So on behalf of the Women's Commission, the Washington State Women's Commission, Regina and myself, thank you so much for being here and sharing your space with your space and time with us.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you, all of you. I appreciate it. Very wonderful. Thank you.
And thank you to the gentleman behind the camera for
yes.
making this work. We appreciate it. Regina, do you have anything you want to? Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
The sisterhood, amazing leadership, and I want to echo Gina's sentiment that we are all so proud of you.
Great.
So grateful for the way you lead and the spirit in which you lead. Continue to lead.
Amen.
Great. Thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Have a good night, all.